The Galactic Concord Council met inside the Great Dome of Elira Prime, a place built of shimmering crystal that caught the light of 3 suns and scattered it in soft rainbows across the floor. Representatives from 37 different species sat in a wide circle, each on a seat shaped to fit their unique bodies. Some floated in anti-grav chairs, others perched on thick limbs, and a few simply stood unmoving for hours. The air hummed with quiet voices, translated instantly by tiny devices worn near each delegate's ear. Humanity had a seat in that circle, though it was one of the smallest and farthest from the center. Ambassador Rail sat there, calm and still, his dark eyes watching everything. He wore the simple gray uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps, no medals, no bright colors, just quiet dignity. Humanity had earned its place through sacrifice, not conquest. For decades, human ships had patrolled the Viridian Expanse, a vast stretch of space rich in rare minerals and stable wormholes. They kept pirates away, rescued stranded vessels, and never claimed the territory for themselves. They believed in the Concord's promise, peace through shared trust. But today, that trust was about to break. The session began with routine matters: trade routes, refugee resettlement, energy quotas. Then the Grand Speaker, a tall, silver-skinned being from the Luminite species, rose. Her voice, smooth and resonant, filled the chamber. We now address the Viridian Expanse Security Resolution. After careful review, the Council proposes transferring oversight of the sector to the Vorthax hegemony. A murmur rippled through the room. The Vorthax were not known for peace. They were conquerors, their empire built on fear and iron discipline. Their delegation sat like statues, tall armored figures with black eyes and sharp angular faces. They did not speak. They did not need to. Rail stood immediately. Ambassador Rail of Sol System requests the floor, he said, his voice steady. The Grand Speaker nodded. You may speak. Humanity has maintained peace in the Viridian Expanse for 43 standard years, Rail said. We've lost over 2,000 personnel defending that sector. No other species has contributed more. To hand it over to the Vorthax without consultation is not just unjust. It violates Article 7 of the Concord Charter. The Grand Speaker's expression did not change. The resolution has already been reviewed in closed session. Your objections were noted, Rail frowned. I was not invited to any closed session. A pause. Too long. Then the Grand Speaker said, The vote will now proceed. Rail tried to speak again, but his comms unit crackled and went silent. He tapped it. Nothing. Around him, other delegates glanced at their own devices, then quickly looked away. No one met his eyes. He realized with a cold sinking in his chest that his link to Earth, to his fleet, to his own staff had been cut off. The vote began. One by one, species raised their hands or activated their voting lights. Green for yes, red for no, and every single light turned green. Even the species that had once called humanity friend now voted with the rest. The resolution passed. The Viridian Expanse was handed to the Vorthax hegemony. Humanity's decades of service meant nothing. Rail stood frozen as the chamber emptied. Delegates filed out without a word. The Vorthax rose last, their leader giving Rail a slow, deliberate nod before walking away. Alone in the vast dome, Rail activated a hidden backup comms chip in his wristband. It was illegal, but every human ambassador carried one. Static hissed, then cleared. Orion Station, this is Rail. Do you read? Silence. He tried again. Still nothing. Then a weak signal flickered through. Jamming. Heavy, can't hold. The line died. He knew then. This wasn't just a political shift. It was a setup. Someone had silenced him on purpose. Someone wanted humanity out of the way. He left the dome quickly, moving through the polished corridors of the Concord Spire. His shuttle, the Whisper, was docked at Bay 12. As he approached, 2 Concord peacekeepers stepped into his path. They wore white armor with blue insignias, neutral, impartial, but their weapons were drawn. Ambassador Rail once said, You are to remain on Elira Prime for further debriefing. I have diplomatic immunity, Rail replied. Not anymore, the other said. Rail didn't argue. He raised his hand slowly as if surrendering. But as they stepped closer, he triggered a small device in his palm, a sonic pulse harmless to most species but painful to the peacekeeper's sensitive inner ears. They staggered back, disoriented. He sprinted for the shuttle, alarms blared. Lights flashed red. Doors began to seal. He dove into the Whisper just as the bay doors started to close. He slammed his hand on the launch controls. The engines roared to life. The shuttle shot out into the sky, weaving through the docking towers as energy bolts streaked past. Behind him, 3 Peacekeeper interceptors gave chase. Rail flew low, skimming the crystal spires of the city, using the tall structures to block their shots. He knew he couldn't outrun them for long. The Whisper was fast but lightly armed. He needed to send a message before they destroyed him. In the cockpit, he pulled a data crystal from his coat. On it was everything. The secret logs, the jamming records, the names of the council members who'd met with Vorthax envoys in private. Proof of betrayal. He plugged it into the ship's main transmitter and began encoding a burst message. It would take only seconds to send, but the ship needed to be above the atmosphere, free of Elira Prime's signal dampeners. He climbed sharply, ignoring the warning lights flashing on his console. Fuel low, shields failing, hull stress critical. The interceptors closed in. At the edge of orbit, he fired the last of his thrusters and activated the burst transmitter. The message shot into deep space aimed at Sol system, encrypted with Earth's highest level key. Then, just as the first interceptor locked on, he ejected the data core into space, a tiny, dark object tumbling toward the asteroid belt, where it might be found later. His comms crackled. A voice, human, urgent, Rail. This is Orion Station. We got your signal. What's happening? I'm being hunted, Rail said, his voice tight. The council sold us out. They gave the Viridian Expanse to the Vorthax. They cut me off on purpose. Why would they do that? I don't know yet, but it's worse than we thought. They're scared of something. Or someone. A blast rocked the Whisper. The rear engine exploded. Rail, get out of there. I'm sending one final order, he said, fingers flying over the console. Activate Protocol Iron Will. There was a pause. Then disbelief. You can't be serious. That protocol hasn't been used since the Titan Wars. It's the only thing left, Rail said. If I don't make it back, tell them execute Protocol Iron Will. Another explosion. The shuttle spun wildly. The comms began to fail. Rail. Stay with us. He looked out the viewport. The stars were clear, cold, beautiful. They thought we'd beg, he whispered. They thought we'd break. He keyed the final command. Then, with the last of his strength, he steered the crippled shuttle toward the dark side of Elira's moon, away from the interceptors, away from the conquered, into silence. The message reached Earth 3 hours later. Fleet Admiral Kova read it alone in her command chamber on Mars Orbital Command. She read it twice. Then she stood, walked to the window and stared at the red planet below. Protocol Iron Will. She had studied it in War College. A relic from humanity's darkest hour, a protocol that turned every human ship, every drone, every orbital defense platform into a single unified weapon. No diplomacy, no retreat, only one order, survive and strike back. It had never been activated until now. Kova took a deep breath. Then she pressed the red authorization key on her desk. Across the Sol system, deep in hidden vaults and silent hangars, machines that had slept for decades began to wake. And far away, on a broken shuttle drifting in the void, Rail closed his eyes, knowing he had lit a fire that could not be put out. On Mars Orbital Command, Fleet Admiral Kova stood alone in the dim glow of the war room. The message from Ambassador Rail played on a loop in her mind. Execute Protocol Iron Will. Those words carried more weight than any fleet, any weapon. They meant humanity was no longer playing by the rules of the Galactic Conquered. They meant war. Kova had spent her life believing in order, in structure, in the slow work of diplomacy backed by strength. But now, the Conquered had stabbed them in the back. She looked at the star map on the main screen. Red dots marked Vorthax ships moving through the Kuiper Belt, ships that should not be there. The Conquered had given them permission. That was betrayal enough, but Rail's message hinted at something deeper, something darker, and Protocol Iron Will left no room for doubt. She pressed a button on her console. A deep, resonant tone echoed through every human-controlled station in the Sol system. In shipyards, on lunar bases, and asteroid outposts, dormant systems flickered to life. AI cores that had been sleeping for decades hummed awake. Defense grids realigned. Weapon locks disengaged. Civilian networks blinked as military protocols overrode them without warning. People on Earth noticed first. Streetlights dimmed. Traffic systems froze for 3 seconds. Then everything returned to normal, but it wasn't normal anymore. Hidden layers of code, buried beneath everyday software, had activated. Humanity's entire infrastructure was now part of a single silent war machine. Kova didn't wait for orders from Earth's government. There was no time. She sent a fleet-wide command. All units go dark. Disappear from Concord tracking. Await further orders. Within minutes, human ships vanished from the galaxy's shared navigation grid. To the Concord, it looked like humanity had simply ceased to exist. But they were still there, watching, waiting, preparing. Far from Mars, on the frozen moon of Thetis 9, Engineer Mira wiped grease from her hands and stared at the storm rolling in across the ice plains. Thetis 9 was a mining colony, small and forgotten, buried under kilometers of ice. Its people dug for rare isotopes used in Starship reactors. Life was hard, quiet, and safe. Or so they thought. That changed when the Vorthax dropships appeared on the horizon. Mira saw them through the observation dome. 3 black, jagged vessels descending through the snowstorm like predators. No warning, no hail, just arrival. The colony's comms officer ran into the control room, face pale. They're broadcasting on all channels. They say the Concord has reassigned Thetis 9 to Vorthax oversight. They're here to secure the facility. Mira's stomach dropped. Secure meant take, and take meant no one would leave alive. She remembered the rumors, old stories from her grandfather, who'd fought in the Titan Wars. He'd spoken of hidden caches, weapons disguised as mining tools, buried deep in the ice tunnels. Just in case, he'd said. Humanity never forgets how to fight. Mira ran to the old maintenance shaft behind Reactor Bay 3. She pried open a rusted panel and found a keypad beneath the ice. She entered a code her grandfather had whispered to her on his deathbed. The wall slid open. Inside was a chamber lined with crates. Not mining gear, pulse rifles, plasma cutters, shield emitters, and in the center, a small data core labeled Iron Will Thetis Cell. She grabbed a rifle, slung a pack over her shoulder, and ran back to the surface. The Vorthax were already landing. Their soldiers marched in perfect formation, armored and silent. Mira didn't try to fight them head-on. She triggered the colony's emergency meltdown sequence, a fake one. Alarms blared, lights flashed red. The Vorthax paused, unsure. In that moment of confusion, Mira led a group of miners, 23 men and women, into the ice tunnels. They moved fast, using service routes only locals knew. Behind them, the Vorthax stormed the main dome, finding it empty except for the blaring alarms. Deep in the tunnels, Mira plugged the Iron Will data core into an old mining drone. The drone whirred to life, its screen flashing a single line. One order, one purpose, then it displayed schematics of a ship. Not just any ship. A prototype called the Dawnbreaker, hidden in a derelict shipyard beyond the Oort cloud. A ship that could fold space without needing Concord-approved beacons. A ship that could strike anywhere. Mira knew what she had to do. She couldn't fight the Vorthax here, but she could reach that ship, and with it she could help humanity strike back. Back on Mars orbital, Kova watched as reports flooded in. Human outposts across the outer system were going silent, not destroyed but evacuated. Ghost cells were forming, small groups of ships operating independently, following the core directive of Iron Will: deny the enemy sanctuary. One cell ambushed a Vorthax supply convoy near Neptune, disabling 3 freighters with precision strikes and vanishing before reinforcements arrived. Another cell hacked a Concord relay station near Saturn, broadcasting a looped message: humanity remembers. The Concord called it terrorism. The Vorthax called it cowardice, but Kova knew the truth. This wasn't chaos. It was strategy. Every action was designed to weaken the enemy, buy time, and gather strength. Still, doubt gnawed at her. Was she doing the right thing? Iron Will was brutal. It turned soldiers into weapons, civilians into assets. It erased mercy. She thought of Rael, drifting somewhere in the void, possibly dead. He had chosen this path. She had to trust him. Then a new alert flashed on her screen, a distress signal from Ceres Minor, a neutral research station. The message was fragmented, but one phrase stood out. They knew. The Council knew. Kova ordered a scout ship to investigate. She needed answers. Why would the conquered betray humanity? What were they so afraid of? Meanwhile, Mira and her group reached the edge of Thetis 9's ice field. They had modified a cargo hauler with scavenged parts and shield plating. It wasn't pretty, but it could fly. As they lifted off, Vorthax fighters scrambled to intercept. Mira didn't try to outrun them. She flew low, weaving through ice canyons using thermal vents to mask their heat signature. One fighter got too close. She triggered a seismic charge buried in the canyon wall. Ice collapsed, crushing the ship. They broke atmosphere just as the last fighter locked on. But then a miracle. A human frigate, the Raven's Wing, dropped out of warp nearby. It fired a single salvo, disabling the Vorthax fighter, then opened a comms channel. This is Captain Voss of the Raven's Wing. We're part of Ghost Cell Theta. You're Mira, aren't you? Yes, she said, stunned. We've been watching Thetis 9. We knew you'd find the cache. Get aboard. We're taking you to the Oort cloud. Mira didn't hesitate. She guided the hauler into the frigate's bay. Inside, she met others like her, miners, pilots, medics, all who had escaped Vorthax raids. They spoke in hushed tones of the same phrase, one order, one purpose. Captain Voss showed her a star chart. The Dawnbreaker is real, and if we can reach it, we can change everything. Back on Mars orbital, Kova received the scout's report from Ceres Minor. The station was empty, abandoned in a hurry. But its central AI had recorded everything. The Council hadn't just betrayed humanity out of greed or fear of the Vorthax. They'd done it because they believed humanity would be strong enough to fight and lose. They wanted a war that would weaken both sides. But there was more. Buried in the logs was a reference to something called the core signal, a transmission from deep in the galactic center, older than any known civilization. The Council had detected it months ago. It was growing stronger, and they were terrified. Kova stared at the data. So the betrayal wasn't just about power. It was about survival. The Council had chosen to sacrifice humanity to buy time. She clenched her fists. Let them think they'd bought time. Humanity wasn't going to die quietly. She sent a new order to all ghost cells. Prepare for coordinated strikes. Target Concord supply lines and Vorthax forward bases. Make them regret choosing us as their sacrifice. Then she looked out the viewport at the stars. Somewhere out there, Mira was flying toward hope. Somewhere else, Rail might still be alive. And somewhere deeper, something ancient was waking. But for now, humanity had one order and one purpose. Fight. Human ships no longer flew in neat lines or followed standard patrol routes. They moved like shadows, silent, sudden, gone before the enemy could react. These were the ghost cells, small groups of vessels operating without central command, each guided only by the core directive of Protocol Iron Will. Deny the enemy sanctuary. They struck conquered supply convoys near Jupiter, disabled relay stations orbiting Pluto, and ambushed Vorthax scout ships in the dark between stars. No warnings, no negotiations, just swift, precise violence. The Concord called it madness. The Vorthax called it dishonor. But to the humans, it was survival. On Ceres Minor, a small research outpost floating in the asteroid belt, linguist Dale sat alone in a dim room filled with old data drives and broken translation units. Ceres Minor was neutral ground, home to scholars from a dozen species who studied ancient languages and cosmic signals. Dale had spent years listening to the quiet hum of deep space, searching for patterns in the noise. Most called it a waste of time, but Dale believed the universe spoke, if you knew how to listen. One night, while tuning a long-range antenna, Dale caught something strange. Buried in the cosmic background radiation, a whisper of sound repeating every 17.3 seconds. It wasn't natural. It was structured, rhythmic, and it was in Old Terran, the ancient language of Earth. Dale replayed it again and again. The words were simple, spoken in a calm, steady voice. One order. One purpose. At first, Dale thought it was a glitch. But the signal grew stronger. It wasn't coming from Earth. It was bouncing off dust clouds relayed through dead satellites carried on solar winds. Someone was broadcasting it across the galaxy, not through official channels, but through the bones of space itself. Dale dug deeper. Cross-referencing ship logs, news fragments, and pirate chatter, Dale realized the signal always appeared after a human ghost cell struck. It was a message, a rallying cry, and it was meant for anyone who still believed in humanity. Meanwhile, far from the asteroid belt, Fleet Admiral Kova stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Last Resolve. The ship was old but strong, built during the Titan Wars and refitted in secret. Around it, 5 other vessels formed a tight formation. Ghost Cell Alpha, the last direct command under Kova's control. They had just received a distress call from Research Station Theta-7, a conquered facility orbiting a black hole on the edge of known space. The message was weak, frantic. "They're coming. They know we found it. Send help." Then silence. Kova knew the risks. Theta-7 was deep in Vorthax-controlled space, but the station had been studying gravitational anomalies, exactly the kind of data that might explain the core signal the Council feared. She ordered the fleet to jump. They arrived to find the station dark, its outer hull scarred by plasma burns. No Vorthax ships in sight. Too quiet. Kova sent a boarding team. Inside they found bodies. Conquered scientists killed not by weapons but by something that had torn through bulkheads like paper. In the central lab, the station's AI core was still active, flickering weakly. Kova jacked into the system herself. Files scrolled across her visor. Logs, security footage, encrypted transmissions. What she saw chilled her. The Council hadn't just given the Viridian expanse to the Vorthax to weaken humanity. They'd done it because they believed humanity would fight hard enough to delay the real threat, the one behind the core signal. The Council knew something was coming from the galactic core, something ancient, something that had wiped out civilizations before, and they'd chosen humanity as the shield. Worse, the logs showed that the Vorthax didn't know the truth. They thought they were winning a war of conquest. The Council had lied to them too. Kova felt a cold fury rise in her chest. They hadn't just betrayed humanity. They'd used them as bait, but there was more. The station's AI revealed that the core signal wasn't just a warning. It was a beacon, and it was getting stronger. Whatever was coming, it was close. Back on Ceres Minor, Dial finally cracked the full meaning of the broadcast. One order, one purpose. It wasn't just a slogan. It was a key. Hidden within the rhythm of the words was a frequency, a way to unlock hidden human networks, even on neutral worlds. Dell used it to access a buried data channel in the station's old comms array. What poured through was the full archive of the Council's betrayal. Voting records, secret meetings, encrypted messages between conquered leaders and Vorthax commanders, proof that the entire war had been staged. Dale knew what had to be done. This couldn't stay hidden. The galaxy deserved to know, but transmitting it openly would get Dial killed. The Concord monitored all major channels. So Dale did something clever. Using the same method as the ghost cells, Dial encoded the truth into cosmic noise, embedding it in starlight, solar flares, even the static between radio stations. Anyone with the right decoder could find it. And thanks to the one-order signal, more and more people were listening. On Thetis 9's ice plains, Mira and her group had long since left. But their actions had sparked something. Miners on other frozen moons found hidden caches. Pilots in remote outposts activated dormant drones. The iron will was spreading, not as a command, but as a choice. Now aboard the frigate Raven's Wing, Mira studied the schematics of the Dawnbreaker. The ship wasn't just fast. It could fold space without needing the Concorde's navigation beacons, making it invisible to their tracking systems. With it, humanity could strike anywhere, anytime. Captain Voss entered the room. "We're 2 jumps from the Oort Cloud shipyard. But there's a problem. Vorthax patrols have doubled in the region. They know something's out there," Mira nodded. "Then we don't fight them. We trick them." She proposed a plan. Send a decoy ship toward the shipyard while the Raven's Wing took a longer, colder route through a debris field. It was risky, but it was their only chance. As they prepared, a new message reached them. Not from Kova, but from Dael on Ceres Minor. It was short. "The truth is loose. The galaxy is watching. Hold fast." Mira smiled for the first time in weeks. Back on the Last Resolve, Kova made a decision. She couldn't keep hiding. The ghost cells were strong but scattered. To face what was coming from the core, humanity needed unity, and the galaxy needed to see the truth. She ordered her fleet to transmit everything they'd found at Theta-7, every log, every image, every confession, directly to Dale's hidden channel. Let the evidence spread like wildfire. Then she turned her ship toward home. Not to hide, but to prepare, because the real war hadn't even begun. And somewhere in the void, the core signal pulsed again, closer this time. The truth spread faster than anyone expected. Dale's hidden broadcast, carrying the full record of the Council's betrayal, leaked into every corner of the galaxy. Traders on dusty outposts heard it in the static of their comms. Students on academic worlds found it hidden in old data archives. Even Vorthax soldiers during quiet watches picked up fragments of the signal. The message was clear: the conquered had lied. They had sold out humanity not for peace but for fear. The galaxy reacted in chaos. On the insectoid world of Kalari, the ruling hive mind held an emergency conclave. They had long distrusted the Council's secrecy. Now, with proof in hand, they made a choice. In the dead of night, a Kalari freighter slipped into human-controlled space near Saturn and dropped off crates of stealth alloys, materials that bent light and masked heat signatures. No message was sent. None was needed. It was an act of silent alliance. On Earth, the news tore society apart. Crowds gathered in city squares, some shouting for surrender, others demanding total war. Governments argued behind closed doors. But in the shipyards, in the barracks, in the hidden bunkers beneath the mountains, men and women made their own choice. They activated old codes. They checked weapons. They waited for orders. Fleet Admiral Kova watched it all from Mars Orbital Command. She knew the pressure was building. If she pushed too hard, humanity might fracture from within. If she held back, the Vorthax would crush them before the real threat even arrived. She had to act, but not blindly. Then came the call from Ceres Minor. Dial's voice was calm but urgent. The Kalari aren't the only ones listening. 3 species have pulled their delegates from the conquered. 2 more are sending quiet signals. They want to talk. The Council is losing control. Kova nodded. Good, but talking won't stop the Vorthax Grand Marshal. He's massing his fleet near Neptune. He thinks we're weak. He doesn't know about the Dawnbreaker, Dale said. No, Kova replied, and we need to keep it that way. At that moment, far beyond the outer planets, Mira and Captain Voss guided the Raven's wing through a field of frozen debris left over from a forgotten battle. Their decoy ship had drawn the Vorthax patrols away just as planned. Now they approached the derelict shipyard hidden in the Oort cloud, a graveyard of half-built vessels and rusted scaffolding orbiting a dead comet. There, nestled in the shadow of a broken hull, sat the Dawnbreaker. It was sleek and dark, its surface smooth like black glass. No markings, no lights. It looked more like a blade than a ship. They docked carefully. Inside, the ship was cold, silent. But when Mira inserted the iron will data core into the main console, the Dawnbreaker woke up. Lights glowed softly. Systems hummed to life. A voice, calm female human, spoke from the walls. Welcome, crew. Protocol iron will active. Awaiting destination, Mira grinned. We're not just crew. We're the spark. But their joy was short-lived. Sensors blared. A massive energy signature appeared on the edge of the system. The Vorthax Grand Marshal had not been fooled. He had guessed their target. His fleet, 10 warships, each larger than a city, dropped out of warp and formed a ring around the shipyard. Captain Voss cursed. We can't fight that. Mira stared at the screen. We don't have to. The Dawnbreaker can fold space. We just need a few minutes to charge the drive. We won't get seconds, Voss said. Then Mira remembered something. The shipyard wasn't just a hiding place. It was a trap. Old records showed it had been built over a natural gravity well, a point where space bent easily. The Dawnbreaker could use it to jump faster. Power the drive, she said. I'll buy you time. Before anyone could stop her, she launched a mining drone loaded with the last of their explosives toward the nearest Vorthax ship. It wasn't meant to destroy, it was meant to distract. The explosion lit up the void. The Vorthax turned their weapons toward the drone. In that moment, the Dawnbreaker's drive flared. Space twisted. The ship vanished. The Vorthax fired anyway, but hit only empty space. Back on Mars Orbital, Kova received the signal. The Dawnbreaker was active. Hope stirred in her chest for the first time in weeks. But hope came with cost. The Vorthax, furious at their failure, launched a full assault on human colonies in the outer system. Concord peacekeepers, still loyal to the Council, joined them. Earth's defenses held, but barely. Kova knew she had to do something bold. Not just to defend, but to expose. She called a rare emergency broadcast. one that would be heard by every neutral world, every doubting species. She stood before the camera, no uniform, no medals, just a tired woman with fire in her eyes. "The Conquered told you humanity started this war," she said. "They lied. They gave our homes to the Vorthax without asking us. They cut off our ambassador and left him to die. They did this because they are afraid, not of us but of something coming from the core of the galaxy. And instead of warning the galaxy, they chose to sacrifice us." She paused. "We are not asking for pity. We are showing you the truth. And if you value your own freedom, you will see who the real enemy is." The broadcast ended. Silence followed. Then across the galaxy, responses came. The Kalari sent more supplies. The ocean dwellers of Nethys opened their hidden ship lanes to human vessels. Even a faction within the Vorthax, disgusted by their leaders' lies, began leaking fleet movements to human scouts. The Concord was breaking apart, but Kova knew it wasn't enough. The Grand Marshal would not stop, and the core signal was growing stronger every day. She made her choice. She would not wait to be hunted. She would strike first, not at the Vorthax, but at the heart of the lie. She ordered all ghost cells to prepare for one mission: infiltrate Elira Prime. Not to destroy it, but to expose the Council's final secret. And she sent a message to Mira: "Bring the Dawnbreaker home. We have one chance to end this." As the human fleet gathered in the dark beyond Pluto, Kova looked at the stars and whispered, "This is for Rael." And somewhere in the void, the core signal pulsed again, closer, louder, hungry. The final plan began in silence. Human ghost cells scattered across the outer rim turned their ships toward the heart of the Conquered, Elira Prime. They did not fly in formation. They did not broadcast their positions. Each ship moved alone, like a single thread in a web no one could see. Their mission was not to destroy, but to reveal, to make the galaxy watch what the Council had tried to bury. Fleet Admiral Kova led the main force aboard the Last Resolve. Her fleet was small, only 7 ships, but they carried the full weight of humanity's rage and resolve. They would draw the Vorthax and Concord defenses away from the planet, creating a window. The real strike would come from elsewhere. Mira stood on the bridge of the Dawnbreaker, her hands steady on the controls. The ship hummed around her, alive and eager. Captain Voss was beside her, eyes fixed on the star map. They had one task: slip past the battle, enter Elira Prime's atmosphere unseen, and reach the Conquered Spire, the tower where the Council made its laws and hid its secrets. Diel, still on Series Minor, prepared the final broadcast. Every piece of evidence, Rael's logs, Theta 7's files, the Kalari testimony, was bundled into a single data stream. The moment the Dawnbreaker reached the spire, Diel would send it to every inhabited world, every trading post, every listening ear in the galaxy. No more hiding, no more lies. The attack began at the edge of the Elira system. Kova's fleet dropped out of warp near the gas giant Helios. Instantly, alarms blared across Conquered and Vorthax networks. Dozens of enemy ships turned to meet them. Kova didn't wait. She ordered full attack. Her ships fired not to kill, but to cripple, targeting engines, comms, weapon arrays. They wanted chaos, not corpses. Explosions lit the void as ships spun out of control. The Vorthax Grand Marshal, furious, committed his entire reserve to crush Kova's tiny force. While the battle raged, the Dawnbreaker folded space. It appeared inside Elira Prime's upper atmosphere, cloaked by the planet's magnetic storms. No one saw it come. Mira guided the ship down through swirling clouds, landing silently in a ruined garden behind the Conquered Spire. The place was empty. Everyone was watching the battle in space. She and Voss moved fast, armed with pulse rifles and data spikes. They entered through a service tunnel, bypassing security with codes stolen from a captured Concord officer. Inside the spire, the halls were cold and quiet. They reached the central chamber, the same dome where Rael had been betrayed. There they found the Master Archive, a glowing sphere of light containing every vote, every secret meeting, every lie. But someone was waiting. Ambassador Rael stepped from the shadows. He was thinner, his face lined with pain, but his eyes were sharp. He had survived. After his shuttle crashed on Elira's moon, he'd been rescued by a group of dissident Lumini who opposed the Council's betrayal. They'd hidden him, healed him, and helped him gather more proof. I knew you'd come, Rail said. Mira almost cried. We thought you were dead. Not yet, he said. Not while the truth is still buried. Together they jacked the archive into the Dawnbreaker's core. Every secret, every confession, every recording of the Council's fear-filled meetings, copied in seconds. Above them, the battle still raged. Kova's fleet was losing ships, but they held the line. The last resolve took a direct hit to its starboard wing, but Kova refused to retreat. Just a little longer, she whispered. On Ceres Minor, Dial watched the signal strength rise. The moment the data stream locked, Dial pressed send. Across the galaxy, screens flickered. Comms crackled. In homes, bars, war rooms, and market squares, beings of every kind saw the truth unfold. They saw the Council vote in secret. They heard the Grand Speaker admit, let the humans bleed first. If they break the Vorthax, we buy time. If they fall, we mourn and move on. The galaxy was silent for one breath. Then outrage exploded. On Elira Prime, the Concord peacekeepers turned on their own leaders. The Luminae guards arrested the Grand Speaker and her closest allies. The Vorthax delegation tried to flee, but their own ships, now aware of the deception, refused to obey orders. The war was over before it could truly end, but as the celebrations began, a new alert flashed on every human ship. Deep in the galactic core, the core signal had changed. It was no longer just a pulse. It was a voice. And it was speaking. Scans showed a massive fleet emerging from the darkness, ships unlike anything ever seen. Smooth, black, silent. Older than the Conquered. Older than the Vorthax. Older than humanity. They moved with perfect coordination, consuming stars in their path. The Council's betrayal made sense now. They hadn't just feared an enemy. They'd feared extinction. Kova stared at the new data on her screen. Her fleet was battered. Her people were exhausted, but she knew what had to be done. She opened a channel to every human vessel, every ghost cell, every survivor on every world. This is Fleet Admiral Kova. The Concord lied to us. The Vorthax used us. But that ends now. What's coming from the core doesn't care about our wars. It will burn us all if we let it, she paused. Then with quiet strength she gave the final order. We are no longer the betrayed. We are the shield. Hold the line. On the Dawnbreaker, Mira looked at Rail. He nodded. They turned the ship toward the dark. Across the galaxy, human ships that had been hiding, healing, or waiting turned as one. Not toward Elira Prime, not toward home, but toward the incoming threat. Outnumbered. Outgunned, but unbroken. In the silence of space, the last message from humanity echoed, not in anger, but in promise. One order, one purpose, and then they flew into the storm.